here know what this medical malady is? PDD. Has anyone ever heard of it? Anybody? Thank God, because I made it up. It's not real, it's called passion deficit disorder. And sometimes when I give talks, especially about Everest or wherever, people are like, they can't understand why you want to do this kind of thing, but you folks, you actually get it. So much for PDD. And it reminds me of this great quote by Howard Thurman, which is, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and don't do it, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So for those of you who love the mountains, you get it. I was at dinner tonight with some of the folks from here, and they certainly get it. But it was like, why would you want to do this? And she said, why wouldn't you? I just don't get it. So, any event, I think what I have next here is a quick clip that takes you mostly around the world on the 7 summits, excluding Everest. I may just have to start this.
You're on the summit of Mount Vinson. Good job. Well done.
So this is Kilimanjaro.
The sun is not yet up. Above us, the moon is a crescent shape. We're taking a view. It's exquisite. All of East Africa is pre-dawn glory.
South America.
Gorgeous day. It's about 10 after 3 on top of Aconcagua, highest mountain in the Western Hemisphere.
This is in Russia.
Panoramic from the summit of Mount Elbrus, highest mountain in Europe. Right now, its twin peak is coming into view there. It's about 20 meters lower than Elbrus proper.
And way down. That's how you get to Antarctica to go climb Mount Vinson. And this is in Australia. That's my lovely wife Maggie, a 46er, who's here. And a little preview of Carstensz Pyramid in Papua. That's me hanging out.
Show me 7 fingers.
Well, we'll make it 8.
Yeah.
So, normally I play that clip before you Everest kind of presentations, but I have to show you my glorious summit shot from Mount Everest. Everyone asks, you know what? Hey Kevin, what's it like to stand on the top of the world? I was sitting there, my lips are blue, I'm just about dead. I had pneumonia, I come to find out later. And it's all in this book. All right, cautionary, big sales pitch. Mount Everest, Confessions of an Amateur Peakbacker, and it chronicles 2 expeditions that I took on Everest in 2002 and 2004. And I wrote it with Gary Collison, and I think it's a lot of fun, and it's normally $15.95, but for today only. Low price of $10, so you can see Jackson afterwards if you'd like one, and I'd love to sign up for you if you want. So, but in any event, we're not going to Everest tonight. We're going to start off going to Antarctica. Mount Vinson in Antarctica. One of the coolest places you can ever go to if you can get there. And how do you get there? There's, you know, shockingly, there are no direct flights from Rochester to Antarctica. You have to go to the tip of South America, Punta Arenas, and this is us suited up, getting ready to get on the jet. It's an old Russian Ilyushin jet plane, cargo plane, and it only goes if the weather is perfect. Obviously, there's no refueling on Antarctica. You land on the ice, and it's pretty crazy. and it's spartan inside. That's kind of the cargo thing. That's the kind of thing they can drive a Jeep into and all that. So we finally land on the ice, and it's just fantastic. We're happy to be there, but we're not quite to base camp of Mount Vinson on Antarctica. We have to take one of these twin otters for about a 50-mile flight. And now Antarctica is the highest on average elevation, windiest, driest, coldest, most desolate place on the planet. Nothing really grows there, but it is stunningly beautiful. This is us after we've arrived to base camp. Base camp is about 7,000 feet. And there are 3 camps on Mount Vinson. 7,000 foot camp, then we double hump loads, which means we carry a bunch of our gear and a sled as we're roped up. We take it to the next camp, which camp 1 would be, at about 10,000 feet. Then we come back and sleep back at base camp and repeat. And our high camp there is only 13,000 feet. And the summit itself is about just a little over 16,000 feet. Now, you might have guessed that we're going to Antarctica when it's really warm. And Phil Ursler, who's from International Mountain Guide, someone who's an amazing mountaineer, said, you know, it's really not that cold. It really only goes down to about -20, you know, so that's not so bad for that time of year. Unfortunately, it was unseasonably cold when we were there. So this is our base camp as we're setting it up and digging it in. And the whole trip here was about 10 days. This is us, we travel roped up. It is technical, there are crevasses and whatnot, but it's a relatively straightforward climb. But you are working it. The scenery is just exquisite. I mean, you look forever and it looks like those are clouds in the distance, but it's just ice. Ice everywhere. It just covers the continent. It's crazy beautiful. Like that. It's almost like not quite a moonscape, but it's crazy awesome. So this is Camp 2, and we're building some stone walls, ice walls, just to make sure to protect us in case the winds come up really bad. And it was at Camp 2 at about 10,000 feet where it got really cold. It was -40 was the coldest for us, and that's cold. When people go, well, what's the difference between -20 and -40? Well, there's a big difference, trust me. This is a little cush tent where we would cook. We dug out underneath there, where we'd have our meals. We were there over Thanksgiving and we had some steak, so that was pretty good. Actually, someone from another expedition left that there, but that's pretty good eating. And on the right here, I've got a clicker, I have to use this for you, is the great Phil Ursler. Phil Ursler was the first American to climb the north face of Everest. I was with him on Everest in 2002 and 2004, also in Ecuador, climbing mountains, Elbrus in Russia, and obviously here in Vinson, and he's an amazing, accomplished guy. He almost got to the top of K2, and he also climbed Kanchenjunga, which is the 3rd highest mountain in the world. So he's a really big deal in the mountain world. And then this is assistant guy Jason Tangway, and I summited with Jason on Everest. But just amazing people. And that's one of the things I love about mountains, is you meet so many great people that you really need to count on. And of course there's some downtime, so we played a lot of cards. Sometimes you can go crazy in the cold. This is Jim. Jim decided that it was at 20 below, he's going to show out how manly he was. He's a little touched. You know, there could be some altitude sickness that affects the brain too. We don't know. And this is our loo. You know, Antarctica is a very pristine place, so all of human waste is bagged and taken off and flown off the mountain. Very important to keep it clean, obviously. That's a good fashion look for me, right there. Keeping really well bundled up. I'm smiling there, I don't know if you can tell. And now we're making our way up the head wall, going up the mountain. This fella here is Dan Barter. I was with him on a number of mountains. He's from New England. Great guy. That's kind of the picture of the head wall that we're going up. It's fairly steep, not crazy, and there's crevasses. So it's significant. We're just getting to the top of the head wall. Again, right at the top, just coming into high camp. This is our high camp. When we got there, our hope was to sleep, although the sun never goes down, so that's kind of weird. It just kind of goes low around the horizon. It's always light at the time of year we went. And the first day we were going to go wasn't good enough because the winds were a little bit too high. But then the next day when we decided to go, the winds were very low, and it was a very balmy 32 degrees below zero as we headed for the summit. This is us getting ready. This is me at a break. I took a little break, and even though it's super cold out, you're still sweating when you're moving along, and so I got nice frosted hair. Now I don't really have much hair, so there's that. That's me approaching the summit ridge. Over there's the summit ridge where we're headed. Again, up that ridge. Really beautiful. And this is us on top of the summit. And what's kind of cool about this is that's me, Phil Urschler, Brian Sheedy, Jordan, I forget his last name, Gail Darling, Dan Barter, and Jim Gagne. And out of all these guys, with the exception of this one fellow, we all have done the 7 summits. This was really our sort of 7th summit for us. So that was a big deal. And these were guys, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and me. We were all on Everest together, so that was a big deal. Of course, when you get back down, you have a victory cigar. This is a little box of wine that didn't totally freeze that we enjoyed. And then finally, this is us just as we're getting ready to board the plane to go back to the, from base camp to what was called Patriot Hills, where we're going to take that big jet back. So that's a quick trip up Vinson in Antarctica. So any questions on Antarctica or Vinson at this point? Sure. How long did it take you to get to the peak? Okay, so on summit day, and well, first of all, to get ready to go to the peak, it took about 7 days, 8 days to get to high camp and be ready to go. And on summit day, I think it was about 11 or 12 hours, so it's about 3,000 vertical feet. And even though it's not super high altitude, you definitely feel the altitude, especially down at the ends of the Earth. So probably about 12 hours. And then for us to descend on the way back from high camp was a couple days. So in all, I think we were only on, we call it being on the ice when you're in Antarctica. We were on the ice for about 13 days. So not super long compared to like my Everest trip. My first Everest trip was 10 weeks door to door. So this is, you know, kind of like a long weekend. Any other questions on that? Come back. Yeah?
Was there any other groups or was it just your group?
Were there any other groups? There were a couple of other groups. So when that plane goes to, from Punta Arenas, the tip of South America, to Antarctica, it's filled up with scientists, adventurers, and mountaineers. You know, there's probably like 40, 45 of us. So I think, Jeff, there were 2 other groups who were on the mountain, and actually one of the groups turned back, and they gave us that steak that you saw. We didn't actually bring that steak, but we were able to, they gave it to us, which was very nice. So, but it was pretty cool. And there's a guy who was on another expedition. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jimmy Chin. He won an Oscar for Meru. He's a famous mountaineer. He was on another expedition. So got to hang out with him a little bit. Also met him on Everest. Yes, sir.
What was the scariest part of that whole trip?
What was the scariest part of the whole trip? You know, the whole anxiety of getting there, because when you're scheduled to go fly there from South America, the weather is such an it factor, you just don't know. We were super lucky. So there's the anxiety of, oh my God, am I even going to get there? Is it going to be okay? But honestly, the scariest, not necessarily the scariest part. I mean, I did punch through one crevasse, just my foot a little bit, so that's always gets your attention. But it was 40 below is so freaking cold. You know, we had great gear, but it's just really cold. So that was probably not the scariest part, but the hardest part. But things went really well. I mean, the team that was up there, super strong and awesome. So, lucky that way. I'll tell you a much scarier time soon when we go to Papua New Guinea. All right, let's leave, I'm freezing. Let's get out of Antarctica. And let's go to Carstensz Pyramid in Australasia. Now, when you're doing the 7 summits, there's a bit of controversy over, is it the highest peak in Australia, the continent, which is Kosciuszko, which is not a hard climb, but it's pretty straightforward and it's fun to do. It's really a hike. Or is it Carstensz Pyramid in Australasia, Papua New Guinea, which is part of Indonesia. So I was lucky enough to be able to do both. And Carstensz Pyramid is a big rock wall climb. You basically ascend a couple thousand feet up here, go around, maybe it's up here, climb up to here. You saw that Tyrolean traverse thing somewhere around there. So that's Carstensz Pyramid. And it's on the island of New Guinea, which is this side, is owned by Indonesia, but it's really the land that time forgot. Cannibalism and headhunting is not far removed from that area. It is just a crazy place. There's something like 250 different languages just because the geography and the topography just separates people. I mean, these are, you know, ancient tribes with nose bones and penis gourds and grass skirts and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's pretty crazy stuff. So we flew to Bia, and then our deal was to go to Nabiri. And one of the big problems of Carstensz Pyramid, it's just in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a jungle, and getting to it and going through all those different tribes is super dangerous, because sometimes the locals are friendly and sometimes the locals are not friendly. So one of the ways in which to do it best is to chopper in from Nabiri. So from Nabiri, we would chopper to Anaratoli. Nabiri's seaside, so it's sea level. Anaratoli is about 5,000–6,000 feet. And from there, we had to offload some of the climbers and some of the gear because we were going to base camp at about 13,000 feet, and helicopters aren't that great with their lifting ability at that altitude. So there's a layover in Anaratoli for some of us. And that's where it started to get weird and scary. So that's me. We're weighing up our gear because you have to be very careful not to overload the chopper. Whoops. So that's us in the chopper, and we're pretty happy. Except he's not so happy. I don't know. He's from Denmark. I don't know if that means anything. But he's a good guy, and I met him actually in South America. So we're all excited. We're going into Anaratoli. There were 5 of us Western climbers, is that right? Yeah, 5 of us. And then we had a guide with us. And so we were going to split up. So we land in Anaratoli. That's the airport, a little strip. It's a small village. And so Jim and I, we're waiting while 3 of them are going up to the mountain with some of the gear. And then some of the locals are coming around, and another group had come down. They have not been running too many trips, and sometimes Carstensz Pyramid doesn't even go for a year or 2. They shut it down because there's political weirdnesses, there's safety issues, it's really extreme adventure travel. So while we're waiting around Anaratoli, a bunch of folks are sort of talking at us. There's a little bit of yelling, and you know, we're the only white people there, and boy, we stick out like a sore thumb, and we don't know the language. We have one guy from Indonesia, from Jakarta, who's our on-the-ground contact. He's not going up the mountain with us, so he's trying to smooth things over. But it was really uncomfortable and really weird. But finally, the helicopter came back. They took on some fuel. They had to truck some fuel up there just to get it because that airport doesn't have fuel available. And then one of the kind of cool things was before we did leave, apparently a big government official was visiting that airport in that little village, and they put on a little show. And you can see this is some of the natives. I might have to start this. Give me just a second. just getting ready for, I think, a government official to come in. So that was kind of a treat in a way, but it still was uncomfortable. But we were able to get into the helicopter, and this is us taking off. Now what you're seeing here is part of the world's second largest gold and copper mine. It's run by Freeport-McMoRan, and it's only about 8 or 10 miles as the crow flies away from the mountain, which is super desolate. In fact, when people were first trying to climb this mountain, one of them was a geologist, and he discovered that there was copper up there. And so this mine is humongous. These are those like 3-story dump trucks that you see, and it is an environmental and human rights disaster. Indonesia gets about 2% of its GDP annually out of there, although the mine has stopped, it closed in 2019. And there are, the locals get screwed basically because all the money is taken out of there, and the tailings and all the other pollution from the mines are part of it, and it's pretty terrible for them. So that's part of the reason there's been murders there. That's pretty scary about it. So this is us, this shot is taken from the helicopter as we're flying by, and I'm going to run about a couple minutes of footage from the helicopter itself as we're going over the mine. It'll give you an idea just how fast it is. So even though it's in the middle of nowhere, there is this, like I said, second largest mine, gold and copper mine in the world. And it just goes on and on. And the locals are not having any advantage from this. They're basically stealing their minerals. And the Indonesian government is very complicit because they're making really big bank on it. Again, these are those trucks that are 3 stories to just give you some sense of the scale of this. And occasionally I heard that they would take some shots at helicopters that come over. And it doesn't happen very often because there are just not a lot of expeditions to this mountain. I think now that the mine has closed in 2019, it's less of an issue. Not really something you'd expect to see on the way to a mountain in the middle of nowhere. This is a big, huge tramp that they put in. It goes on either side of it. I mean, it's an amazing engineering feat. It's still a pretty exciting helicopter ride, nonetheless. It is enormous. It's hard to fathom the scale of just how big a hole in the world Earth is. And a couple more photos. And then I've got a little bit of footage here just of the helicopter approaching our base camp. And one of the trickiness with this particular mountain is that base camp is 13,000 feet. The mountain itself is a little over 16,000. So acclimatization, going right from sea level to 13,000 feet is pretty abrupt. You could get mountain sickness. We were fortunate in that no one did. And we kind of quickly offload this stuff. like, okay, you're on your own. Have fun. Call us in a few days. So just unloading some gear, getting set up. This was our base camp there. We were the only people on the mountain at that point. Like I said, it was the year I went, which I think was 2008. There were only about 4 expeditions over 4 or 5 months, so not heavily traveled, but pretty amazing experience. That's my friend Brian, who was also with me on Everest and Mount Vinson, and just an awesome guy. And he's pointing out this is our head wall where we're going to be heading up. It's very grippy rock. The actual beginning of the climb was about an hour's walk from base camp. And again, we're at just over 13,000 feet. We spent a couple days there just to try and sleep at altitude so we'd be okay at that deal. But it is really abrupt to go from sea level to 13,000 feet. Some people can get altitude sickness. And we had a contingency plan to go down part way if people weren't feeling well, but fortunately we didn't have to do that. So the way to go do this is you start really early in the morning. I think we took off at about 4 in the morning. And unfortunately the weather wasn't perfect. You see it was raining a little bit. We had a teeny bit of hail, not terrible. But one of the great things about this mountain is that the rock is so super grippy and rough. Even though it was raining a lot that day, you still got great traction. In fact, I wore leather gardening gloves just because the rock was so rough. And I could have cut my hands otherwise. And that's a shot of me, and we're going on fixed lines up here. So we have our SID harnesses on. Attached to our SID harness is an ascender. So it's roped into this. The ascender is a device that you clip onto the rope that slides up, but doesn't really slide back. And then in addition to that, you have another safety carabiner roped up to your SID harness that you clip yourself into so that you have 2 points of connection should you fall. So don't fall. Fast enough. And we definitely wore helmets because there was danger of some falling rock. More danger from the person in front of you, maybe, kicking something up by mistake. And here's another little bit of video footage of, I think, us maneuvering up the head wall. You hear the water flowing a little bit, because it did rain. And we're up there somewhere. So the beginning going up, it's about 2,000 feet up the head wall, which is pretty steep. So, and that's to gain this Knight's Edge ridge to go the rest of the way. And again, we're the only folks up there.
No problem. Definitely don't need pressure. Slow. No choice. Lambat. What?
That's me right there, my little red helmet. And just about getting to the top of getting to the ridge there. Coming up that way.
Nice job, Kevin.
See those big gloves there? They were actually just gardening gloves that had leather in them. And they were really great until my wife washed them and ruined them. Thanks, baby.
Smile.
I was smiling on the inside.
Nice. Dude, nice job.
That's my friend Barney to help me up.
Getting there.
Another shot of us as we're heading up the rock wall. So now when we're on the ridge here, it's kind of funky, and you can see that the weather's not ideal. The visibility was probably, I don't know, maybe a quarter mile or so. We could feel the sun. We really thought it was going to break through, but it just never did. But it gives us this eerie sense. Temperature, it was around probably 40 to 50 degrees. Not high wind, so not terrible. That's me there. You see we're coming along here. But I think it looks so cool. And then, you know, there's a number of where you got to do little rappels and little climbs up there. I'm not a great rock climber. This is a technical rock climb, so I'm good enough for this. But it was definitely challenging and fairly exciting. That's me there, coming down, and we come up from around here. And heading up a little bit. So there's a lot of up and downs along this Knight's Edge ridge, right? And on either side of this ridge, it's about 2,000 feet, 1,800 feet down. So it's like a pyramid, but it's a pretty sharp pyramid. So you bounce all the way. Coming around the corner, and again, you see we are roped up, which I'm pretty comfortable when we're roped up and safe. If you ask me to do some of this stuff without any protection, you know, like the free solo guys, I think that's crazy. So I like this shot too, it's pretty cool. And then here's a little bit of video. I believe this is the Tyrolean Traverse. Some people probably know what a Tyrolean Traverse is, and some people might not. But basically, it's a rope strung across an expanse. And what you do is, with your sit harness, you clip in, and you go hand, you'll see. I can show it better than I can explain it. But it's pretty exciting. And a couple of us had never done it before.
Did anybody explain how it was first set up?
Yes. So that's me coming to it.
Uh-oh. What the fuck's going on here?
Tyrolean Traverse. What was that again?
Wow, what's going on here? My goodness gracious.
What was the first one?
Holly T. Williker. This is something I've never done before.
Not too hard.
Oh, really?
We'll talk you through it.
Good.
So that's me on the Tyrolean Traverse. It's about 60 feet straight down and then another 1,800 feet on either side.
So, Dan's about to do a Tyrolean Traverse.
Now you say.
What do you do?
This is it.
Just
I
hand
don't
it.
know, but this is a first for me, so what do you even call this thing?
Tyrolean Traverse.
Tyrolean Traverse. So,
What do you do? You just hang down or what? Do you hold the rope or?
Yeah.
Which ropes do you hold?
The three.
Yep, on the 3.
Okay, now lean back.
So you have to go both ways, going to the summit.
So,
and back.
There you go. Lean
So
back.
Dan's,
There you go. There you go. That's it.
here we go, guys.
all right.
There you go.
Dan's on belay with the purple. And then there's 3 other lines that are tied together.
It is a little bit of a leap of faith. It's kind of sag, so it is going up a little bit. So It's not as easy as it looks. It's not. Yeah, sure. I don't need to see what's down there. A couple other shots on it, because you know, a Tyrolean traverse is pretty sweet. My buddy Dan, Jason, and then I think this might be getting towards the summit, this footage here. It's still morning for us. That's me negotiating a little something, something.
And then I use my hands up where you have your hands. Yeah, nice.
Brian, who's not
exactly just like that.
a guide on this trip, is a guide for outdoor recreation at Whitman College, and it's a big deal, so he's on. So this is us getting the summit.
Show me 7 fingers.
Well, we'll make it 8.
All right.
That's it, that counts.
Well, actually, we haven't actually done it yet. We do have to get down.
That is true.
Yeah.
Then we can do that. So,
Right.
but
But better than the summits, good camaraderie, teamwork. Right on.
We all fell off. Now, those guys are great. We called ourselves the Northeast Contingent because Brian was originally from Syracuse. He lives in Walla Walla, Washington. Dan Barter was originally from New Hampshire, as was Jim, another guy up there, and I'm from Rochester. And those are just some of the best guys you could be around. I was with them, like I said, on Everest, Mount Vinson, some other places as well. They're just great. So Dan Barter said, hey, well, we're not down yet. And then we also said, let's show 8 figures, because all of us had done both the Carstensz Pyramid and Kosciuszko, which was sort of cool. But he's right about you're not down yet. And in fact, most of the accidents in mountaineering occur on the descent because you're tired. And you know, if you're running up the stairs in your trip, it's not a big deal. But if you're running down the stairs in your trip, it's worse. So this is a little bit of our descent. I'll show you just a bit as we're almost back down to more solid ground and off the technical part of the climb. So we have to rappel down a lot of it. Not super hard rappels, but you know, don't
Let's
fall.
go, Dan.
Okay. Get it slow.
Nice and easy.
Okay, that's me. We're almost down. This is like one of the last serious rappels.
Got it? Got it.
We're upset now.
Can we break you?
I think I'm funny.
Sure, we can go to Bali. Yeah.
I told them we should have gone to Bali instead of Carstensz Pyramid for vacation.
Nice job.
So, once you're down, you know, normally at this point in a presentation, I would say, hey, isn't that great? Any questions? Yeah, we kicked that mountain's butt. Yada. I mean, it was a great climb. We had a wonderful, wonderful time. But now, we were still remembering having to get the chopper back and then going to Antarctica. So the chopper was going to come to our base camp. And it couldn't come one day because the weather wasn't good enough, so we had to wait an extra day. So it was like, hang around. And when it came, Jim and I we were the first 2. So we went into Antarctica with some of our bags, got dropped off. The chopper then took on a little bit more fuel, went back up the mountain to base camp to get the rest of the guys. Now, while Jim and I were around there, there was somewhat of a crowd when we were going up the mountain, but this time there seemed to be more folks, and they seemed to be a little more exercised over something. We had no idea, and it got really comfortable. Gentleman in the back asked me, you know, what was the scariest part? The scariest part was not climbing or doing the Tyrolean traverse. It was getting out of Antarctica, because Antarctica turned into this shouting match. The locals were all around. They surrounded our gear. I'll show you some footage. You know, even the kids are pissed off at us. I don't know why. They're negotiating. This is our guy, Nova is his name. He didn't go on the mountain with us, but he was there with logistics. And he's from Indonesia, Jakarta, and he's trying to reason with these folks. And we have all the paperwork, which is really weird, and you gotta bribe from folks. And so, but it's a thing, you know, and they're arguing, and we have no idea why they're mad. At this point, this is our gear. They've taken our gear kind of away from us, and they've surrounded it. And we're just going like, you know, what is going on here? You know, and we could just disappear and no one would ever know. Now at this point, again, this is shot a little ways away. The crowd is surrounding our stuff still. This is my buddy Dan Barter. You see him in the middle of the sea of folks while they're yelling and whatnot. And then here's just a quick, like, 30-second clip of one of the locals who was arguing, and he's saying something about Papua and America and yelling. So obviously we have no idea what he's saying. And Nova's trying to, you know, work the crowd a little bit. And there's really no, it's an airport, but there's zero security, you know. You saw kids, everyone around there. So we were like, oh my God, what is going on? So finally Nova says to us, and he's Indonesian, he speaks the language, probably not some of the dialects, but. So he finally says, hey, leave your gear here. He was supposed to come with us on the helicopter. Get in the helicopter and just get out of here. I'll try and rent a truck later, and it would be like a 10-hour drive through the jungles to get it back to the seaside town of Nabiri. And so that's what we did. So we go jumping into the helicopter, you know, and the rotors and the things are starting to whir around. And we're trying to shut the sliding door, and some of the folks, the locals there, see that we're getting away. They're trying to keep the door from closing. And this is a view from inside the helicopter. And you could see they had like softball-sized rocks in their hands. So they grabbed the rocks, and we didn't know if they were going to throw it at the helicopter at this point. So we're sort of freaked out. The helicopter is going, you know, faster and faster, and they're, you know, ducking, and then we finally swoop away and take off. And we're like, wow. And so very quickly thereafter, I took this photo of my friend Brian, like a minute after we took off and departed. And he's got that Whiskey Tango Foxtrot look about him, you know, because, oh my God, what had really happened there? So we finally made it out of there, and when we landed in Nabiri, and we're staying in this little hotel, and we know we're safe and all that, we don't know about our gear, but hey, we were just happy to be there. We filmed each other and described what went on.
Hey, we're here in Nabiri, and we're pretty happy to be in Nabiri. Just got back from Enogotali village, which is about halfway between here and our base camp.
We left base camp this morning by a chopper, and obviously our emotions were really high, our spirits were high, we were excited.
We just had a pretty intense experience in Bondi. But there were a lot of different fractions in the village who wanted to have say in what was going on with the Americans that were there passing through.
And some of the locals gathered and weren't happy with us. They thought we were possibly the 3-4 mining company, explained to the climbers.
And what happened was we had the leader of the village who had one position who felt we needed to register with them.
And a little bit of an issue there before.
And Nova had gone to the Department of Tourism, and we had a permit from them, and he had all clearance from the Department of Tourism that we could be there. So we had those two fractions. We also had the police there, and a lot of villages who had different positions.
And then they got more intense. Jim came in with the second trip in the helicopter back from base camp, and we're trying to load our gear, and there's some shoving.
And we were engulfed, and our gear was actually trapped by a circle of people. The helicopter was surrounded. It got so intense that, finally Nova said, get on the helicopter and leave the gear behind. Get on the helicopter.
Some guys grabbed rocks, and it looked like they were going at the helicopter.
They had big rocks the size of baseballs that they were ready to throw at the helicopter.
And we were so glad when we all got loaded in the helicopter and swooped away from Tali, headed here to Nabiri. We did not get all of our baggage.
We had to leave some of our luggage behind. It was an intense ordeal, and we're happy to be out of there.
We were pretty happy to be back all intact.
And we're pretty happy to be here. Luggage can be replaced, but it's nice that we're uninjured.
So when we did leave, I come down in the village, and Nova was able to run a truck and drove through the night 10 hours, which would have been a half-an-hour helicopter ride. But he took our gear, got it back to us, so we were unscathed and we got everything back. But you asked me the most scared I was ever in the mountains. Like, I had pneumonia on Everest and nearly died there. But I was at altitude, so I wasn't all that with it. My mental acuity wasn't so great. So I didn't realize how screwed I was. But this was definitely the most scared I was. So we finally got back, and one of the delights of Indonesia is Bintang beer. So a little bit of celebration. So thank you for joining me as we went to Antarctica and to Papua New Guinea. I hope you enjoyed your travels this evening. Like I said, happy to sell some Everest books if you'd like, and more than happy to answer any and all of your questions. Thank you so much.
You were saying on the Carstensz Pyramid that the vertical gain of the rocket was 2,000 feet. What were the lengths of your ropes? And what else besides ropes, or maybe the only rope, was in your backpacks?
Well, actually, there were preset fixed lines. So it was about 2,000 feet up the rock wall, and then maybe about another 1,000 feet up the knife's edge, more or less. So the fixed lines were placed. So, which is kind of similar to Everest. So we didn't have to bring ropes other than our climbing gear and our harnesses and ascenders and things like that.
And what else was in your backpack?
Just the normal, extra food, water, first aid, headlamps, what else? Obviously layers of clothing, for various kinds of things. That was about it. So.
Did anybody ever explain how the original Tyrolean traverse line was set up? The first time you go up, it's not there.
Not exactly, yeah. It was sort of, and if it weren't there, we would have had to, and we did have some extra rope with us, we would have had to down climb, go across that little thing, and then rock climb up the other side. It just would have taken a lot longer. So it had been put in there by previous expeditions. Exactly who, I don't know. How trustworthy it all is, I don't know.
Yeah, put your faith in the fixed line. For expeditions where people don't go very often, it's not like it's used that you can really trust that somebody was there last week or the day before. So it seems like it's a little more faith that you can put in those fixed lines than you put on more popular routes.
gentleman saying, you know, how secure are those fixed lines in general? How are you really confident in them? You know, not 100%, but the folks who have gone before us, you know, I mean, you test it, you look at the quality of the rope, the quality of the anchors, and you can make a pretty good guess. Is it perfect? No, but it was okay. Thank God.
That rock was rather strange looking. Do you know what kind of rock it was? Is it volcanic or what?
I did at one point, and yes, it is. A geologist would marvel at some of the rock. It is kind of strange and strided looking, and it was super grippy. Even though it had rained a lot, it was like hero rock. I mean, you just stuck on it. So that part was great. I would have to look that up and find that for you. All I know is that it was really easy, you know, like around here, some of the shale and stuff like that, you just crumble and all that other stuff. Total opposite here. Couldn't be better.
Any injuries?
No, not a one, which was really great. Again, like I said, we were super scared going through Australasia for our safety. You just don't know when you don't speak the language and you know people are really pissed and you have no idea why. And maybe it's to do with the mines. We just didn't know. I will tell you there was an injury on Mount Vinson with one of the guys, Jim, the idiot who was out there in his underwear. He's an EMT and a nurse as well. So he's really great with that kind of world. But one of the guys on another expedition, an Irishman, had frostbitten his thumb and cut it pretty bad, and he helped stitch him up. So, but that was the worst injury there. No frostbite. That guy had a little bit of frostbite, but within our group, no frostbite. So my worst injuries, you know, on Everest I had pneumonia, which I didn't know on summit day. So descending down from summit day to high camp, and then from high camp to camp 2, and then all the way to base camp. I was kind of a mess, but I made it. But I found out later that I had pneumonia when I got to base camp. So, but yeah, I was pretty lucky. No, not bad. Katie Kuzak, please. Sorry, it's a one question. Apparently just enough, because it was harder than I thought. Because it does sag when you go down there, and so you're a little freaked out because you're suspended in midair. So it is a fair amount. Sometimes we would try and wrap one leg around it to see if that helped a bit. But it was like, you know, about a 10-minute ordeal getting across. So, and you had a second question. There is no real wildlife on Antarctica except around the shorelines. There's nothing there. There's no plants, there's no trees. There's probably some bacteria and weird something or other somewhere in there. But there's nothing on Antarctica, which makes it really cool in a way. I mean, it is so pristine and awesome. Animals there, not really, because we were up high enough. We were up about 13,000 feet. So we didn't see much. I mean, there's just a few birds and insects and things like that, but a Yeti, sure. You know,
How did you finance all these trips?
I stole money from my business partner. No, I was very fortunate, and you know, you don't start out. People always go, "Did you always want to do the 7 summits?" I started out in the Adirondacks. I'm a 2-time 46er. I love the Adirondacks. One thing led to another. The mountains got bigger. My first big mountain was Denali in Alaska, which I could ill afford. I was newly married. We were dirt poor. Put on a credit card that I couldn't afford, but I had to go. And we didn't even sell it. I had to go back the next year and was lucky I made it. But business has been pretty good. I also, on Denali, I produced video of climbing Mount McKinley, and I sold about 2,000 copies of that. So I was able to make this a business expense. So I was able to, my business paid for it, even though it came out of my sort of account. But it was able to pay for it pre-tax. And it was totally legit, because I sold a couple thousand videos at $20 a piece. And so that was one of the ways I did it. And on the Everest trip, I decided I was going to possibly do a video about writing a book. So I did have legitimate, this sounds crazy, legitimate business reasons. So that really helped to defer some of the costs, if that makes sense. Yes.
Are you still climbing, and what are some of the destinations you want to do that you haven't done?
I want to go to Bolivia. Maybe Maggie will go with me. Maggie I went a second time, we went to Kilimanjaro. She decided she wanted to do it. I've already done it. And she was kind enough to let me go with her, which was very nice. But she rocked it and killed it, which was awesome. I go to the Adirondacks. Maggie and I go to the Adirondacks a couple times a year. I climb a cool mountain outside of Las Vegas, of all places, about 35 minutes out. That was pretty cool. Wherever I go, I try to do something. Maggie and I were in Vermont. Small Peak, we went up there. Where else? We were in Hawaii in January, February a bit this year. And we went up Mauna Kea, which is, we saw snow in Hawaii. We're the only idiots to go to Hawaii to see snow, but there it was. So, you know, there are going to be places, and we went to, I'm not going to go really high and really long again, like Himalayan giants, but something like Bolivia that could be a 20,000 foot peak, that would be really great. We went to southern Utah, we hiked and climbed around Bryce Canyon and Zion. So, you know, we still got that outdoor Jones working for sure.
So you mentioned the hostility of the people in Guinea. Is there any place that you've went that, or any of the line that are noteworthy as far as coming across very well?
Where have you gone that's super welcoming? The Adirondacks would be nice. It's pretty cool in France. In Chamonix, we went up this place, and it's a tradition. They have guides. It's, you know, it's a pretty amazing deal. Most places, the Sherpa people within the Khumbu Valley in Nepal are amazing people. I can't say enough about the Sherpa people, and it's not a job description. It's a you know, ethnicity of folks. And the Sherpa people are Buddhists. They're freaking awesome. I never would have made it to the top of Everest without my Sherpa Mi'kmaq sharing, and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have made it back down alive without him as well. So love those folks. Pretty awesome. But you know, I mean, it's adventure travel. The first time I went to Everest, there was a Maoist uprising in Nepal, and so there was still some weirdness around. So, but mostly good stuff. Mostly people are rooting for you right behind you again. Well, I worked out ridiculously hard for all of this, and before, you just typically don't decide to go to Everest, you know. But even when I went to Denali, that was my first big mountain in Aconcagua. I worked really hard. I worked out probably at least 5 times a week. Long, slow distance is really good. I like killed a Stairmaster as much as I could. I ran a lot, did weights as much as I could. So, and then before I went to Everest, I kind of had to have a talk with my wife. It's like, hey, honey, I'm thinking about going to Everest. And so she had some ground rules for me before you get what I call foi. It's a chapter in the book called foi. You know what foi is? I like inventing words. It's full wife approval. And you really can't go anywhere without that. So she laid down the law that I was kind of a frugal mountaineer. You better get great equipment. You better be in top physical condition. You better not sugarcoat anything to me. You know, don't tell me it's going to be 6 weeks and it's really going to be 10 or 12, and things like that. So one of the first things I had to show her with the expedition company was it's called the body disposal election form, which is basically, what do you want done with your body should you die on Everest? So that gets pretty rare, you know. I decided I just wanted to leave it up there. Fortunately, he came here. So we're good on time. Thank you very much again. Have a